Hey everyone, how's it going? So, here's my problem with the current state of badges in MapleStory. Some people have them, some people don't. It's as simple as that. Now, why is this a problem, you might ask? First one, new players. Anyone coming into the game and realizes that this is a thing, it's going to be a turnoff for them. You can argue as much as you want that it's not super relevant, but it's still a turnoff for a lot of people. And while I understand the point that comparing yourself to other people is dangerous and it can lead you down a bad path, this is for you specifically, Scarter, in case you're watching this. You also have to understand that comparing yourself to other people can be a positive movement. It can help you better yourself and try to achieve what others have achieved. This is in fact a common game design practice in which you show new players what existing players already have, and new players can be like, oh, I can be just as strong as this person. And that is what we usually mean when we say that this is a turnoff, this is unfair. This is why usually in most MMOs, right after the tutorial, you're usually brought to the main town where you see everyone that's high level, everyone with their shiny gear, maybe using their shiny skills, and it makes you want to achieve that. Let's go to the extreme example and say that familiars are kept in the game but are no longer obtainable. Is it fair? Is it not? I'm of the opinion that it is not acceptable the same way badges in their current state aren't. At that point, we're just discussing how much power creep we can give to legacy players, and I'm of the opinion that 0 is the right answer. To those of you that don't know, you can get, let's say, a ballpark of 120% boss damage from familiars, and new players wouldn't have access to this 120%. Is that okay? Is it not? If you think that's okay, then we fundamentally disagree on the balance of the game and the health of the game, and you can click off this video because I don't really have an argument for you. The second point would be gear upgrading. In the case in which people have all the gear that they can get and have everything perfected and there's nowhere else to spend their mezzo on, people with badges are going to be inherently stronger than people without them because they have one extra equipment in which they can spend their money. Well, this is a very fringe minority of the population, but it still happens. The other case is when you have a set amount of mezzo to invest into your gear, and you're gonna have better results if you can distribute that mezzo over more gear, on average. My third point would be, if they removed badges for balance reasons, as Nexenso put it, then they should do something about people who still have the badges. If they were removed because of balance, then there's currently no balance for the people who existed prior to the removal of the badge, right? Now, I'm not saying outright remove them for everyone because people on Reboot invested their time into them and people on non-Reboot invested both their time and their money into it. So you can calculate on average how much someone spent to get a badge to the point where they are, and you can refund them whatever percentage you want of that, over 100% preferably. Alright, so as for common counter-arguments, one that I hear a lot is you can still progress more than someone with a badge. While this is technically true, you could also just play 24 hours a day and progress faster than anyone else. I think this is a moot point. You have to compare people with equal time and equal investment and equal motivation to play the game at the same rate. I think it's fallacious to say that if you don't quit and you don't have a badge, you'll eventually do better than people who have a badge and quit, because at that point you're comparing different people. You're comparing people who quit and people who keep playing. Meanwhile, if I use the same argument and compare someone who doesn't quit to someone who doesn't quit and doesn't have a badge, then you'll see that one will progress slightly faster than the other one. Is the difference significant? Maybe not, but it still is there. And please don't come with the argument that you could just get lucky and progress faster than the other person. That has nothing to do with anything. Another common point is that now you have more events and you have more 5th job skills and you have more power than you ever did before. While this is also true, it doesn't address the fact that everyone has access to these. Everyone has access to the events that are coming. Everyone has access to the terror burning. Not everyone has access to a badge. A potable badge, that is. You could also point out that events are time limited too, and people who were there had access to them, and people who weren't don't anymore. But what you fail to see there is that events eventually come back. That's just how the game works. Knowing that something will eventually come back makes it easier to bear the fact that you don't have access to whatever it provides. Even if it takes another 3, 4, 5 years, it doesn't matter because it will eventually come back. Another point about events is that any power gained from an event isn't exclusive. I would be making the same argument for Dark Lords of Darkness totems or Wondroid hearts as I do for badges if I knew that they were never going to come back. As for other event items, such as experience, nodes, symbols, droplets, fake absolabs, fake arcanes, whatever, these are things you can get during the event easier, but it doesn't mean that they are completely inaccessible off of events, even if it takes you longer to do so. Another argument that I see people bring up is that players now don't have to go through the old gearing meta. While this has nothing to do with badges, people need to realize that this was the end game content at the time. Eventually something replaced Absolab, eventually something is going to replace Arcane. You can't keep hanging on to the fact that people didn't have to upgrade X gear because it's no longer relevant. It's a toxic and elitist mindset to think that just because you've played through a game in which everything was harder, that other people should do the same, even though everything that you did at the time was what the end game was. Now that the end is somewhere else, people are having similar struggles to what you had doing that content at the time, but just for the new content. A good example of this is World of Warcraft. Recently, with the release of Shadowlands, they reworked the whole leveling system. Leveling got squished, and leveling time became a record low. Players were no longer forced to play a little bit of every expansion, and they can now pick one expansion in which to do their whole leveling experience. It would once again be elitist to expect everyone to go through the months of leveling of old expansions just to play the newer ones, when the endgame content is no longer what is in the old expansions. While badges in and of themselves will never really stop you from doing any content because, let's face it, the game is balanced around KMS and KMS has a lot less power than we do on GMS, but the point is that it's not acceptable to have legacy power creep that new players cannot obtain. That is the whole point. In conclusion, the normal progression of an MMO is to come out with new content while making old content either obsolete or easier to obtain, create catch-up mechanisms for new players and returning players alike, while giving old players more content to look forward to. Badges in their current state are a turn-off for a lot of new players, a lot of returning players, and the main point of contention seems to be how much legacy power discrepancy is too much. I'm of the opinion that any is too much. People on both sides seem to not really understand each other, and I hope this clears up some confusion. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you next time. Some people... Tito.